Awesome. All right, I'll get going here. All right, thanks everybody for joining us today on Addicts Living Free. I got a great guest today on the show. Tony's going to join us and share his truth. I'll give you a fun fact about Tony. Tony is a one-armed heavy machine op. How do I put that?
Heavy equipment operator.
I should know this actually. Heavy equipment operator. So operates it with one arm. You know what? Does a great job. So yeah, that's something unique about Tony. Before we get started, do you want to give a shout out to anybody?
To my sponsor and my grand sponsor, Rick and Mark. They want me to forward this to them when it's done, and my girlfriend Tammy in Medicine Hat.
Cool. Well, hope you guys enjoy. Maybe we'll get those guys on here someday too.
Yeah.
So, start every episode off the same way. What's one thing you're grateful for today and why?
Today I'm grateful for a connection with my dad, my sister, and my kids that wasn't very long ago. I probably wouldn't have had that, so I'm very grateful for that. And I better say I'm grateful for Tammy too, because she'll kick my butt if I don't.
Fair enough. How did you? So we'll start this off. Like, what was your childhood upbringing like?
My childhood was actually normal as can be. My dad worked on the roads. He's a road builder, so he was gone for most of the summers. But my mom stayed at home with us kids. Till everything was cool, calm. Like there wasn't a lot of drinking in my family. My dad and mom drank occasionally, but I don't think they were ever alcoholic or addict. Um, until I was 13, that's when everything changed. That's when my mom died in a car accident. And my sister was only 4 months old, so that changed the family dynamic pretty quick. So
Just the two of you, you and your sister?
no, I had a younger brother. He passed away last summer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
So you've been through a fair bit of this then, eh?
Yeah, death. Yeah, my mom passed away, and my brother passed away. I've had uncles and stuff that have, we've put a lot of our family to rest, but it's been. But I got a 92-year-old grandmother that hangs in there, so and I maybe she'll listen to this too. I don't know, but yeah, she's. We got a scare with her earlier this year too, but you know what? Her power of her prayer has been amazing, so she's doing good. So
It's awesome. It's crazy what the prayer can do, eh? Like how much energy is in that, right? And how much of a difference it can make.
yeah, for me, I even start my day out with a prayer, and I finish my day with a prayer. And throughout the day, even like it's funny, road rage isn't much like it used to be now that I pray for the other person that cut me off, right? So it's funny. The power of prayer has really changed my life. It has.
Yeah, I believe I can identify with that one too, and just being open to it, and beautiful thing, in the program that we're in, that we get to kind of choose what we want that to be, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey because, I always prayed, but it was always, please God, get me out of this. I won't do it again, God, please, right? but it's when I learned to pray properly, and a lot of that has to do with my sponsor, who's he's kind of put and taking me through the steps in the big book properly. So prayers changed my life for sure.
awesome. Um, let's go with this one. How'd you get introduced to drugs or drinking, and how old were you?
Well, drinking, like I said, my mom and dad drank, and it was never a big thing for me then. But after my mom passed away when I was 14, that was the first time I'd ever drank. And when I that first time I drank, it was like boom, right? Like wow. And like that was the thing I chased for years and years and years, was that because I was a habitual blackout drinker. Like I'd never gotten to the point where I drank every day, but I would, every time I drank, 95% of the time it was blackout drinking, or and a couple days here, a couple days there. And working on the road construction all of my life, it was normalized, so we drank a lot there and stuff. I actually didn't get introduced to drugs, hard drugs, was until I was 38 years old. Where the first drug I ever did was I smoked marijuana for a little bit when it was close to being legal. So I figured, hey, you know what, this stuff's legal. It can't be all that bad. And then that lasted for about 3 months, and then I switched to cocaine pretty quickly, and it was 2 years, and cocaine took over by the end of 2 years. So
Oh, we'll catch up on that one. I'm gonna fill in some gaps on this
yeah.
here too. So from the age of 14 moving forward, obviously, you're chasing that. You said, what was kind of the progression like, or at what point, maybe how old were you when, it really started to escalate?
Well, the the one time, and this was about when I was 18, 19 years old. I'd gone to like lots of dances and cabaret dances. Growing up in a small town, we always had we called them beer fests, right? Every
Mm.
weekend there was something going on. So we'd go to those, and the first time I really realized that the drinking had become a problem was we were at a dance and it ended up in a big fight. And I actually thought about this actually when I found out I was going to come here and record this, because I never really thought about this, and I kind of never chalked it up into my story until I actually put some reflection into it. But it was we got into this fight. My brother and I got into a fight with a bunch of guys, and my girlfriend at the time was there. And when we left, she was my brother was the sober one, and he was supposed to drive, but they wouldn't let him in the truck. So I happened to already be in the truck, so I threw the truck and drive, and I backed up, and I ended up hitting a couple of innocent bystanders, and I got charged with impaired driving, causing bodily harm, with the help of a good lawyer, as any good addict or alcoholic should have. Um, I ended up getting it bargained down to dangerous driving, and but at that point, I remember this clearly now. As I had two 60 ounces of Royal Reserve sitting on the basement. You know how the basement ledges have those ledges on them. I had two of them there, and I remember opening them up and dumping them out. And that was my girlfriend, who's the mother of my first two kids. She was like, "Wow, that was big." And a week later, I was back drinking. So that was the first time I realized it might be a problem, but I chalked it up to bad luck, right? Those
Yeah.
guys started to fight, da da da, and so on, right? So
Yeah, I could see that. But at least, all of a sudden awareness. Well, and then you push it away, right? Or you push it down, and like
yeah,
when you don't know any different, right? You just
yeah, and you
keep
know
going.
what? At that point, like I said, I didn't have the DUI, and when everything kind of rolled back in, I was working still, and the drinking, like the partying at work, was always there. And I watched it because I'd go out to work with my dad in the summertime when we were kids and stuff, and I'd see the crew would go drinking, and some guys would show up to work some days, and some guys wouldn't, right? And then the next day that guy was back, so I was like, oh, okay, well, this is how it is on the road, right? And so that's kind of where I didn't really think my drinking was out of hand for years. I was like but with that being said, I knew it was out of hand at times, right? So
Yeah.
I guess the awareness was always there. I guess I didn't really put the pieces all together that way.
Well, and when you hang around with people like that, like I did road construction. That was my very first job ever when I first got out of school, 18. And yeah, same. People just drink every day, right? Or, I also did framing after that. And then on the way home, we'd pick up a box of beer and drive on the way home. Like it was just normal, right? And when you surround yourself with people like that, or you work with that, it's the norm. You don't know any different, really, right?
Yeah, and I think, like I said, yeah, everything around that world is normalized. And from road construction, I went to the drilling rigs, and that was the same thing, right? You work graveyards, you make sure, if you were the lease hand and winter nights, you made sure the beer didn't freeze overnight, so you had your beers for going in the morning, right? That was just the way it was. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the industry I grew up in, right? So
Yep. Um, did you ever try stopping on your own, like other than that week time, like throughout your period of drinking?
there was probably, it was around shortly after my accident. I realized that maybe I should probably shut her down, and I just before my accident, actually, I went into a 12-step program, and I thought maybe that there was a problem, and I worked on that for a bit, and you know, and then I don't think I went to the right meetings, because it was always like doom and gloom, and oh my God, you're always going to be this way, you're always going to be sick, and wah wah wah. So despite myself, I did stay sober for a period of time, but I was miserable. So I was like, well, if I'm going to be miserable, I might as well be drinking, right? So I went back to that lifestyle after. So that was probably, yeah, around 2008, 2009. I think is whenever I really thought maybe there might be a problem,
Yep.
after multiple affairs and all that stuff, right? Like with the girlfriends I had, and the first wife, all that stuff just kind of accumulated, and I realized, well, maybe drinking is the problem, right? So I tried taking that out of the equation for a while, and it worked, but I wasn't a very happy camper.
Yeah, I could. Well, and what's the fucking point, right? Like, you know, I'm under the belief we got one life to live, and we got to make the best of it. And something turns out to be miserable, then something needs to change, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, being clean or sober at that time was miserable. So fuck it, right?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what I thought. So I ended up going back to drinking and, you know, met more girlfriends and started picking my girlfriends that liked to party. So that was kind of where life went for a while there. And like I said, my first wife was a drinker. She liked to drink, so we used to party all the time, and that just led to more and more problems. And then then the 12 step wasn't working anymore, so I just kind of backed away from it at that point.
Yeah. Do you think the seed was kind of planted at that time, or were you kind of totally turned off from fellowship at that point?
You know, it was planted because what happened was is I ended up buying a bunch of CDs from the fellowship, and I used to listen to them and thinking I thought maybe it would just absorb, right? Like, because
Mm.
like all through school and that I didn't study hard, but I always got good marks because I could just listen and learn. And I was on the honors roll for a long time, except maybe towards the end of high school when drinking and partying was football playing was a little more important, right? But so I figured if I listen to these CDs, and I still have them out in my car. My CD player doesn't work in my car though, but I was thinking, like, wow, some of these guys really got it going on. Like, well, maybe someday, right? And so it was planted back then. I was still having fun at the time, right? So,
Yeah, recovery is definitely like an action word, so to speak, right?
hmm
Like, yeah, you can't just listen to it and then be healed or absolved. It's yeah, it takes work, right? And
yeah. Well, and that's the one thing that always held me back was I didn't. Despite being a hard worker when it comes to the industry I'm in or anything else, like building a fence, yeah, I'll build a fence all day. But when it comes to that sitting down and working on myself, nah, not so much, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. So fast forwarding a little bit then here. You said you got into the drugs, you got first introduced to the cocaine. How old were you at that point?
38 years old. I'm 43 now, so I was
Okay.
38 years old when I first I was coming. I grew up and lived in St. Paul at the time. So I was coming into this is kind of a funny story to so I was coming into Edmonton to go to a 12-step meeting, which was AA at the time. So as I was coming in, I lined up from a prostitute that I'd been chatting with um, to get this cocaine to because well, maybe alcohol's the problem, but I've never done cocaine, so cocaine's obviously not the problem, right? So I bought it off of her. I did a line before I went to the meeting. Um, and at this point, I'd been reading the big book, and I'd been going to a lot of meetings, so I heard a lot of stuff. Um, so I did that line, and I went to that meeting, and it was like, wow, that was a profound share. Like I was like, wow, this is great, right? So that and that was a like I bought a gram the very first time, and that lasted me like 2 3 weeks. I was like, well, that's not so bad, and so then I bought another one, and then it didn't quite last as long, and then you know after like the 3 month mark, it was an 8 ball a week easily, and then towards the end of it, like I said, it was 38 to 40, and I was done.
Yeah,
So.
that's kind of like my story. Well, I got introduced like speed was my drug of choice,
Hmm.
and I got introduced at the age of 16. By 21, I was in rehab, right? And that 18, I would say like it took about 2 years for it really to kick the crap out of me after I had my accident. I was partying like a rock star, and then transitioned from the drinking to the speed, and then yeah, within 2 years I was friggin' homeless and had a bicycle, a backpack, and where I laid my head was home, right? So
Yeah.
I can I see how the progression all of a sudden. So doing that, like as you're doing it from the first time and over the course, did you see like did you think you're in control of it the whole time?
I did. I really did. Like I had a job at a municipal government as a construction manager. Like I despite me, I succeeded, right? Like I was a superintendent at the construction company I worked at. I was up until I lost my arm, I was going to be a driller on the drilling rigs. Like everything I did, I always excelled at it professionally. So I was a construction manager at the company I was at. at the government I was working for, and you know what, I would pick it up, and I was doing it at work, but I wasn't. It never became a problem. I was still doing my job. I was still managing it, and that's what I thought. Like that's
Mhm.
why I thought I was still in control of it. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't up until probably November, October 2019 is when things changed. But up until that point, it was no problem. Like I was doing it at work, I was doing it while driving. Hell, I was even driving down 118th Ave, and there was a cop pulled me over, and I had a line on my console of my truck that I had to quickly dispose of. It didn't go up my nose because they were right there, so it went in the back seat. But the reality is that yeah, I thought I was beating the system for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And did you have this stigma of what like the addict was, or
Well,
what you didn't want to become? Like if I get to this point, then I might have a problem.
you know what? I honestly believed I'd never get to that point. I was one of those guys is like I had a like the last job I had, I was making $39 an hour. I was pulling in 12 grand a month. Like I was and I was never homeless. I was never, I always had nice vehicles. I always had snowmobiles, quads. Like I even paid my child support, right? So I figured this was all under control. The reality was is that I thought that an addict was somebody who lived on the street, somebody who went through the garbage cans, picking out cigarette butts, picking out cans, right? And that's what my belief was. So I didn't think I was ever it was ever a problem for me.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. And I think, and that's part of the reason with this podcast too, is like for people, like the reason why I started it, or a part, like one of the reasons was like for people to be able to identify or see, and maybe the people that are afraid to go to their first meeting be able to hear without actually having to set foot through the doors first, or being scared that they can soon identify with the guests before ever going, and maybe, I don't know, put the pieces together, I guess, for lack of a better word, or see, I've been there, so
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like and once I finally was beat into submission, I realized that I probably would have got there if I didn't get that awakening at that time, right? And it still took me a while once I had that awakening to figure it out, but I realized that, you know what, I didn't have to become homeless to realize that I can't control this. I can't manage this like if my mind told me I could.
yeah. What was your awakening, or what was that point, if you want to?
Um, I was working in the Northwest Territories. We were doing some work up there, and I'd left the management job, and I went back to the company I'd worked for before, and they got some work in the Northwest Territories. And when I was up there, I didn't have any of the hard drugs. I just brought up a whole bunch of weed with me, and I was I was smoking a lot of weed because it's the only thing that kept me sane. And I was freaking out on everyone. And but the point was, I came home. My wife at the time, my second wife, she had she told me she didn't want to see me. She didn't know I was doing the drugs though, but she told me we were having some problems and stuff, and she told me she didn't want me to. It was August long weekend actually. It was just this time 3 years ago, I guess. She told me she didn't want to see me. She was going with her friends to the Big Valley Jamboree, and she was mad at me because I was it was a whole complicated story with a couple of other friends, but essentially she thought I was screwing around on her, which I hadn't been then. That wasn't the story then, but there was times, right?
Mhm.
But so I instead of just going home and thinking about where my life is going, I came into Edmonton, got myself a prostitute, and I don't know how much money I spent, but then I also won $3,000 at the casino. So that all went into drugs, and at that point, I was like, "Ooh, this is getting serious." And that was actually the weekend when I told my wife, because she wanted. Eventually, I ended up at Big Valley Jamboree for the last night to spend some time with her before I went back to the job in the Northwest Territories. And that's when I told her, like, I told her I've been dabbling in cocaine, right? I didn't tell her I was full blown. And we kind of went through some stuff there, and then it was actually in October of 2019 whenever we got into a huge fight. We were visiting some friends in Leduc, and we were driving back at the overpass at the airport, and we left her vehicle at the hotel, and we were coming back in my vehicle, and we got into an argument, and I felt like driving the truck off the overpass. And it was at that point I just broke down, and I told her, like, I'm addicted to coke. I need to figure something out and do something different. So that was the point there where things kind of went. That was where I realized that maybe I am an addict, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
You just have that moment of clarity where you're like, yeah, you get to that point where I get what you're saying. Pardon me. How did things go from that point forward then?
Well, the next day I went downtown Edmonton to the addictions. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one down on like 103 Ave or something like that.
The detox? Or
It wasn't. No, it wasn't the detox. It was like
oh,
the counseling. So I can't remember what it is, but it's on 103 Ave and like 101st Street. It was a big brick building. I don't even know if it's there anymore, to be honest. And I went and talked to somebody about getting into a rehab. I talked to a counselor there. He sent me home with some paperwork. I went to my doctor. He put me off work and he filled out all the paperwork. And I ended up getting a call from the Medicine Hat Recovery Center in early November and did an intake with them. Um, so they told me, if you come here, all right, do you need detox? And at that point, I wasn't using. I said, no, I won't need detox. So they said, okay, you can come in January 4th. So from November to January 4th, November, let's say 9th or something like that, in that area. I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay clean. I'm going to go to treatment. I'm going to get this fixed. I'm going to find out. I'm going to fix me, right? Um, November 17th, I used again. Went to Lloyd, had an excuse, went to Lloyd, picked up, spent the night in Lloyd, got high, did the whole 8 ball that night. And then I stayed clean again till December 7th. It was like a month apart. December 17th, um, did it again. Same thing. Made an excuse. I got to Lloyd, missed my son's basketball game because that was my excuse to go. He was playing somewhere in the area. Missed that game, and I went and spent the night with a prostitute and got I don't even know how much blow it was that night, but it was a lot. Um, Came home, and then I had to be clean because there was no detox bed for me, so I had to be clean to get in there. So New Year's Eve, I drank, but I didn't do any drugs. Went to the treatment center in Medicine Hat on the 4th. Did my 28 days there, so that's kind of where everything went. Um, Nothing against the Medicine Hat Recovery Center because they planted a bigger seed than any other program did for me. And I did meet my first sponsor in AA there. But what happened there was they're more of a harm reduction and more of a thought based, right? Like,
okay.
like play the tape through stuff and remember your last drugging, how what it was like, not the first, and which, what, if that works for somebody, all the power to them. But they kept telling me, at 90 days, that's going to be the toughest spot of your first year of recovery, 90 days. So when I left the treatment center, I had my mind made up that at 90 days, I was just going to go get high because it was going to happen anyway. Right. So I went to a few meetings after I got out of there, but yeah, yeah, 90 days to the day
Yeah.
I relapsed. Right. So, um, sobered up, and then a month later, another one, and that time I got caught by my wife. So that put everything right back to where we were, right? So
Yeah. What was the so what was the benefits of going to that 28-day program? Was that your first time going to like a live-in facility?
yeah, that was my first time in any treatment center, yeah. And the benefits at the time, I thought it was just I honestly thought that they were going to fix me. I'd spent money on therapy, I'd been to counseling, and none of that worked. But this was a treatment center, right? Like, it's a treatment center; they're gonna fix me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think like the Hollywood movies and that glorify that stuff, right? Because like I don't, well, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in Hollywood understand addiction, but when it comes to like that's the mindset I had, right? Like, it's a treatment center. That's what they're here for. They're here to get me to stop. It'll work, right? So I went there to be fixed, but the problem was is I had 12-step knowledge in my head, so I bullshitted my way through it, I guess,
Hmm.
is the best way to say it. Like, I just kind of, yeah, yeah. Oh, that makes it. Yeah, difference between spirituality and religion. Yeah, this, and quoting lines out of the big book because I was a phony, right? Like I said, I
Yeah.
was going to AA meetings high as a kite. So it planted a seed though, because I got to meet some of the guys from AA down there. Like my current sponsor, I also met him while I was in treatment too down there. So that, I think that was the biggest benefit, was that it planted a seed that there's more outside of treatment, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's not a one done kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, you're not just magically fixed and life goes on great, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you relapsed 90 days to the day after that, and then you're saying you did it again after.
yeah. I did it in middle of April, got caught, and then I think at that point the trust with my wife was totally gone. But she stuck it out with me for a bit, and then and then I started doing with my sponsor through Zoom, because he was from Medicine Hat too. I started doing step work, and and doing that fourth step stuff and
Mhm.
writing it out. And then I started with a new company at the beginning of May. Actually, I started with them just as I relapsed. So went for the interview, got the job, came home, and what does a good addict do? Celebrates, right? So that was the one I got caught. So I got cleaned up, and I then they sent me to Fort Mac to work, right? So, and you know what? And it doesn't matter. Everyone says, "Oh, Fort Mac's a drug town," and now, knowing what I know now, it wouldn't have mattered where I
Yeah.
went, right? But first thing in my head was Fort Mac. Ooh, I bet you the cocaine up there is deadly, right? Like, so
You're already kind of pre-planning
it,
it, eh?
you know what? I had it lined up before I got there.
Yeah.
I found somebody on through Leo List or whatever the hell those sites are, and I found somebody, and it was I relapsed up there. We got rained out because there was another construction company, but we got rained out, and I ended up staying up there for a few days while the rest of the crew went home, because I was a foreman with them, so they wanted me to stay and make sure the site was taken care of and stuff. And then about 4 days into the rain, the superintendent called me and said, "Okay, we're shutting her down. I'm coming back up there. You go home, take your days off." And this was just after the May long weekend. It's actually May 17th. So I came home, coming down off the drugs. Can't do any drugs. I'm going home. Got to impress the wife, right? So I got home, and she read my step four that I left at the house.
Wow.
So, needless to say, it ended up in a big fight. The cops were called, and the cops ended up telling me, "Well, one of you need to leave." I said, "Well, whatever." I had my camper hooked up to my work truck already. I said, "I'll just go. I'll take my camper and get out of here, and I'll go to my dad's house for now." And so I left, and then went to my dad's house, called a bunch of people that weren't in the program, just a bunch of friends that would, "Oh, poor Tony," right? Like that's exactly what they would say, right? So I played that card out. And then the next morning I got up, and I went back to my house to see my wife, because there was no restraining orders, no nothing at that
Yeah.
point. But I went back there, and she had a friend over there that um, I didn't particularly care for. So we ended up getting into a big argument that morning, and she got into a fight, and I punched holes in the walls, and I was coming down. I still hadn't had any drugs, right? So
Yeah.
I was losing it, and I seen she had a couple boxes of clothes packed up. Hindsight, it wasn't packed up clothes. It was clothes she was taking out for summer clothing that was put away. So I thought she was leaving, right? So then I'm mad, and so she locks herself in the garage, and she ends up calling my son, who came over to try and calm me down. And I had that house destroyed. I flipped the table over. I smashed the walls, and she wouldn't come out of the garage. So I took her box of clothes, and I lit it on fire and threw it in the middle of my living room downstairs. And I sent a picture to her. I took a picture and texted it to her, and she came out of the garage pretty quick, and the cops were there pretty quick too. And
Yeah, I believe it.
and then so the cops said, "Well, whose house is this?" I said, "Well, it's my house. It's in my name. It's all the title, everything. She's not even on title." And he's like, "Well," he says, "she wanted me charged." He says, "Well, I can't charge him with burning his own property. He can burn whatever he wants as long as he doesn't claim insurance." So at the end of it all, the cops said again, "I suggest you leave." So I left. I went, and I had still had my camper hooked up to the truck. Everything. I went and unhooked my camper. Got on the phone with a prostitute that I'd been pretty friendly with over the years, and I lined up an Airbnb and a bunch of drugs, and grabbed a bottle of scotch out of my old man's liquor cabinet, and I was heading to Edmonton, which is about an hour and 40-minute drive for me. I remember about 20 minutes that drive. At that point, um, I woke up at 3 p.m. in the Sherwood Park Police Detachment, laying there on the floor. Didn't know where I was, and at that point, I started having chest pains, throwing up, and like I'd never felt pain like that in my life, and I'm missing an arm, right? So, um, what happened then was they asked me if I wanted an ambulance, and I said yes, call an ambulance. Like I didn't know what was going on, so they came, hauled me out of there, took me to the hospital, did a bunch of heart tests and everything on me, and the doctor said there's nothing wrong with your heart. He said the only thing we can see is, he says, when was the last time you drank? And I honestly hadn't drank since New Year's Eve of 2020, like New Year's Eve
Oh
2021,
yeah.
right? Like, so I hadn't drank for 6 months, 5 months, 5.5 months. I'd done Coke and stuff since then, but I hadn't drank anything. Um, and what happened was, is that I drank so much so fast, my blood alcohol level was a 1, which they said you were probably starting the signs of cardiac arrest or whatever he says, but yeah, he says the only thing we can see is that it was the fact that you're allergic to alcohol and your body's had enough, and it was shutting down and telling you you got to get this out. And so what happened at that point is they released me from the hospital. My son came in and he picked me up, and I went back to my dad's for 3 days because I couldn't get anything out of my company truck because that's what I was driving, and they wouldn't let me anywhere near it
Yeah.
before then. So when I came back into Edmonton, or I guess yeah, Edmonton, to pick up my stuff out of it, my cell phone was left in there and everything. And when I got my phone, I plugged it in and charged it. I looked at it and I was reading the text messages to this prostitute. And at that point, the only drug I'd ever done besides marijuana was cocaine. Well, and the Ativan from my accident, but that was prescription, and that was even before I was doing drugs as a recreational hobby at the time, right? So, um, but I looked at that and I lined up. I think it was like an ounce of coke and heroin, and the thing about that is in the back of my mind for years, like for the last 2 years of me knowing that, okay, now maybe this cocaine's getting out of hand, the suicidal thoughts were coming.
Hmm.
And I figured, well, if I'm going to go out, and this was probably just after I got out of the Medicine Hat Recovery Center. um the thoughts, well, if I can't beat this, I'm going to go out on a big party, and then the last thing I'm going to do is shoot up, take too much, and die, right? Like
Yeah.
that, because at that point suicide was a real thing in my brain, right? So when I seen that, I was like, uh-oh, like this is bad, right? Like, because I was having clear thoughts. I was sober for 3 days. I hadn't drank nothing, I hadn't drugged nothing. Like I was sober as can be, right? Like
Yeah.
I was sober. I wasn't recovered or anything, but I was sober. So I just asked my son to take me to the hospital here at the Grey Nuns, and I walked into the emergency room and said, I want to kill myself. So, needless to say, the psych ward there is quite lovely.
Welcome you
So,
in open arms, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's where that was the last. Well, not the last run, but that was the one that got me to the point where like this was going to kill me.
Yeah.
So,
What's your clean date today?
October 24th, 2020.
So you're coming up on 2 years.
It'll be 2 years this fall. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. What was different this time? So we're gonna. I kind of want to change the, whatever the word is. I don't even know. Change the direction here, and I want to get into the recovery aspect of it. Um, what was different this time, or what was
Well,
from that clean date?
that clean day, just a little bit of a story before that, because I went to the Thorpe Recovery Center, did my time, moved to Kelowna, and then I had another really bad relapse in
Okay.
October, just before my clean date. Actually, the 23rd was the last time I'd ever used any drugs. But just that, I went on a 3 day bender with a new prostitute out there that I was hanging out with, and I bought a gun off of a drug dealer. And that morning, the prostitute left. Obviously, I think she had business, but um, I was sitting there and I did my last line at about 11 o'clock the night before, and I was sitting there all night thinking, like, man, I'm not going to get this. I'm not going to get this. And it was 6:57 a.m. I'll never forget it. It was it was probably 6:56 is when I picked up the gun. I cocked it back, and it was a 9mm handgun. I stuck it in my mouth, and I was like, "This is it. Like, I can't do this anymore, right?" And my phone, um, my text message went off. So I pulled the gun out because I thought maybe it's the drug dealer, right? Because I'd been texting him all night and I hadn't gotten a hold of him. And when I flipped it over, it was my sponsor, my second sponsor that I had met in Medicine Hat Recovery Center, asking me, "Are you okay?" We hadn't talked in a long time. Like, it had been in probably a month since we had talked. Um, and I was like, "Oh,
What are
right."
the odds, right?
Like at that point, I was like, you know what, like, shit, right? Like, there's something there.
yeah.
So I texted him back, no, not really. I'll call you in a bit. So what I did is I wrapped up the gun in a towel, and I live 3 blocks from the Okanagan Lake, right? Lake Okanagan in Kelowna. So I walked down there, and it was the sun was coming up behind me, kind of shining over the lake, and I threw the gun out into the lake, and it's hopefully it's down way deep, but whatever. It's anyone who's listening to this, if you're scuba diving, you might find one. But and then I went back and called my sponsor, and I told him I'd relapsed, and that's where the real recovery started, was that day.
I just want to touch on this because you mentioned it earlier as the first rehab you went to, or the first 28-day, how they talk about like remembering your last using, and just the way you described it, the way now, like with the sunset and everything, like reminds me of, you remember your last using days, right? Or your final thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was. I think, like, because like I'm big in Cocaine Anonymous, and they use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So I'm a big believer in that spiritual experience. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like when Bill W. talks about his spiritual experience and how it changed like that. I didn't change like that, but the reality is that right there was like, yeah, there's something more than me out there. And today, like, that was the start of, okay, now what do I do? And my sponsor's like, then when I called him, that's exactly what Rick said to me. He said, well, what are you going to do about it now?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say, he didn't give me the, well, Tony, blah blah blah, oh wow wow wow, like, no, like, he said, you got to do some work or you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's what happened at that point. So
And when you're desperate, you become willing.
yeah.
It's in that desperation where the willingness comes. So what were your next steps and
um
on this road?
well, at that point, I had no reason to be in Kelowna anymore, so I moved to Medicine Hat, and I got really involved in the program there and doing the step work and stuff. And I got through, and I got going to lots of meetings, and I started doing sponsoring and all that. Like, I got through the steps fast. I did all that work that needed to be done, and I had done the steps before, and I was honest about it, but I didn't do a proper set step 6 and 7. My first sponsor kind of glanced over it and said, "Okay, here you go. You're on step 8." So I was trying to do amends, but not actually wanting to get, that humbly being humble. I didn't know how to be humble at that point. So I learned to be humble, right? Didn't have a driver's license because I got the DUI. I was walking to meetings. I was doing whatever was asked of me to in order to recover, right? So I I just started burying myself in the program. I helped along with there was a new CA meeting starting up, so I made that my home group down there. I started, opening up and getting there and setting up and doing, just kept doing. Like, I did so much AA and CA that I was just like, and
There's no room.
yeah, there
Yeah.
was no room for anything else. But I was still like, oh, is this really gonna work, right? But I was going through the actions anyway, right? Because there was times where I was like, oh, is this really worth all this effort? Because, like, I don't feel great anymore, and I'm still going, like, I was going through my divorce, and I was dealing with my first wife and child support issues, and I was in court, and I was like like God, right? Like, if you ask, he'll help you, right? But and it's not. And I learned through that that selfishness was still there, right? So I yeah, that my first year of recovery was hard. It was I like, some people get it really easy and go. And my sponsor even said it my 1 year. He's like, if I was a betting man and there was anyone I'd bet against, it would have been Tony. He's like, I didn't think he was gonna make it, right? So the reality is that my recovery really wasn't solid. There was a lot of dry white knuckle days. It was tough until about July of last year,
Yeah.
and then it kind of took off a bit. And then my brother passed away in August, and then but I came home, and but that was when I realized that was my brother's funeral, all his old friends and that, because my brother was one of us, like just not taking his inventory, and he's probably looking down on me right now, and he's probably pretty happy that I'm at where I'm at now, right?
Yeah.
I tried really hard to get him into the program, but that was the first time I realized that the obsession to drink or drug was gone, because there was guys smoking pot, there was
Yeah.
guys drinking after everyone gets together and tells old stories, and I never thought about drinking or drugging once, and that was like, wow, like I didn't realize that it's gone. Like
That's cool.
and and since that day, it has been gone, right? So, and then I ended up in the psych ward after that, doing everything. I had sponsors, I was working the steps, I was going to meetings, I was doing service work, I was doing everything, and I still wanted to die. So I ended up in this Alberta hospital here in Edmonton, and found out that I was bipolar. So they put me on meds, and once the meds took effect, everything just kind of leveled out, because, like the big book says, right? Like we need to get sober
Hmm.
before we can figure out if there's anything else there, right? And like I didn't know I was bipolar. Like everyone said, "Oh, you seem like you're ADHD." I'm like, "Well, I probably am, but like
Yeah.
I,
That's
but the thing was is that once I started taking that, and then I moved back up here from Medicine Hat, over the winter, and I got a job here and working with the company I'm working for now here in the city. Um, and I think at that point, like I started really being honest about who I was, and like my boss knows about my past. Um, and need time off to go to a meeting. Got to leave half hour early. Yeah, go ahead. Do your thing. And but these last 6 or 8 months, I've really been involved with the group up here, speaking at detoxes and stuff, and going to meetings, sharing, and tackling those newcomers, and giving them hope,
yeah.
and I like it's just been I'd say since May, it's just been spiritual experience, spiritual, and it's just and today, like I don't think I've ever been happier in my life. And like I'm gonna be 44 in November, right? And like to say that is something, like, because I thought, I had the Cadillacs, I had the houses, I had the boats,
Yeah.
I was never happy. So yeah, that's where my recovery's been this last while. It's been giving back and realizing that maybe it isn't about me anymore.
Yeah. You get to that point where you realize, yeah, like getting out of self for helping others is really what it's about, right? Like I listen to podcasts and I can't even remember it off the top of my head, but there was something, what it's about the character that you are, about giving back, or it's developing that character. I wish I could remember it, but I can't. I am going to take us back just a second here, though. That first year, you said it was a struggle. How'd you deal with triggers, in the sense, if you couldn't get a hold of somebody on the phone, what were some things you did to deal with triggers?
I did a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation. My sponsor will kill me if I don't say this, but in our lineage of sponsorship, we believe Trigger's a horse and he's dead. Um, but until the obsessions move, I understand what you're saying about triggers,
Yeah.
right? So, um, you know, there was a, I was pretty fortunate. The guys in Medicine Hat were always there. Someone always picked up the phone, and if I isolated for a little bit, somebody always called and checked, right? So I'm pretty grateful that way, and I think that's why I ended up in Medicine Hat. Like it was a place that I needed to be, and I think my higher power definitely put me there for that very reason. Um, but yeah, lots of prayer,
Yeah.
prayer, prayer, prayer. Meetings, meetings, meetings.
Yeah. Did you have a conception, like, coming into the rooms or getting into it? Well, I guess you were going to meetings before. How'd you develop your conception of your higher power, and how do you build that relationship or maintain that relationship?
For me, because I've got a native background. I'm Métis, so I've always believed in the Creator and the, the moon and the stars and the power of the universe. And that's still my belief today, right? Like I don't know if God is the guy sitting on a golden throne in a white robe up in the stars, right? But for me, it's just the power of the universe. Like the moon can move oceans, right? It makes people loopy on the full moon, right? Like, let's
It's
be
true.
honest, it's the truth, right? So I've always believed in that. And today, like, um prayer, like I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is pray. like I like the directions that are in the big book, the text of the big book, I follow that on awakening to a T. And at night I do that inventory, and when I'm wrong, I do all the stuff it says when it comes to being in contact with my higher power. And for me, it's just constant prayer and meditation. Even at work, like I'm pretty lucky I have the opportunity, but I have a Bluetooth in the equipment, so I listen to podcasts and I listen to speakers, and sometimes I just shut everything off and just listen, right? And meditation has been huge. It's probably not as good as it could be. I'm still working on that, but when all else fails, it's thy will, not mine, right? Like for
Yeah.
me, that's been a huge thing, right? Like I'm not in charge anymore, and I realize that now.
Yeah. When you do realize what you can control, and that's your perspective and your outlook, right? Or your attitude. Like within, that's the only control. The only control we really do have is of ourselves. Um, I always say, I totally forgot what I was going to ask you there. Uh, crap. I totally. What was it? I don't even know. Um, shit. I don't even know. Let's go with this one then. Goals that first year then.
My goals at the start of the year was to save my marriage. That didn't work. Um, Come January, it was like done. So I kind of let that go. But honestly, I wanted to get to that 1 year mark. Just, I wanted to be, once I got through the first set of steps, like the first real set of steps, I'll say that because I'd done them before and they were half-ass steps. But once I got first that real set of steps, I wanted to just give back. So I got a couple sponsees and I just started working with others. Um, I started school. I finished school. I got a business administration diploma, which I'm not using. I'm still running heavy equipment, but it's all part of my big plan, right? So, and I did plan on going back to school to get into addictions, either counseling or whatever, and that's next year's goal. But yeah, that first year was just to maintain what I had built, and relationship with my kids, with my dad and my sister, well, my brother at the time, but then he passed away. But yeah, it was just to rebuild that stuff that I had almost lost. They all tell me this, and it's funny because my youngest is 12, my oldest daughter's 16, and my son's 19 now. But they all told me, Dad, we're glad you figured this out because we were ready to give up. So I wanted those relationships back, and I wanted my family in my life. So
That's awesome.
that was my biggest goal.
Yeah, and succeeded too, by the
Yes,
sounds of it, right? Like
absolutely.
that's a reward or a gift. Well, I want to say reward, right? But you earn it. Everything we get, we earn because we put in the work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do remember the question that I was going to ask you right after about like the whole prayer and the times of the day. How is structure benefit? How does structure benefit you in your life?
Um, I find if I get up and I pray and I meditate, my day goes great. If I get rushed, if I hit the snooze one too many times and I'm rushed, my day doesn't go so great. With the job I'm at now, it's been good because we've had set times. But the other job I was at, like not the other one, but the previous crew I was on, which some days we'd work till 3, some days we'd work till 8. Like now it's at 12. So it's, but when I'm structured is when I'm healthiest. If I've got my honorary home group is the St. Paul group that's been kind of struggling. So if anyone's listening, we have a Zoom hybrid meeting there. So I don't know if I'm allowed to promote that here or not,
You can
but
say whatever you want. That's the beauty about this thing. There's no censorship, and we're not that popular. I don't think AA or NA is going to come knocking on my door anytime soon. So
so, but so I can get with the schedule I have now, I can get to the meetings that I need to, and I can help the people that I've been working with. And I've got time to speak at the detox centers and speak like speak at the things that people ask me to do. So, and then at night, I always wrap it up nicely and give it to God, right? So, whether I get to bed at 11, because my girlfriend and I, we talk of, and most of our talks are 99% recovery, right? Which is amazing. I didn't think that was ever going to happen with in a relationship, but um, what it ends up being is at the end of the day, I just wrap everything up nicely and I give it to God. It's usually anywhere between 10 and 11, sometimes later, sometimes earlier, depends how tired the day is. But if I don't start and finish that way, the next day or the whole day is
Yeah.
it's a rough day.
It's off, eh?
Yeah,
Like
it's
you can tell.
crazy, but like I went to a meeting once and one of the guys said, "Well, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of prayer. It ain't gonna hurt you." And I was thinking, "Yeah, well, whatever, right?" But now it's like, yeah, if I don't miss prayer. I shouldn't say if I miss because I don't anymore,
Yeah,
and that's kind of where like I said, the last 6 months have brought me. So,
that's awesome. This question I like to ask every guest is mentors or role models in your life, and what area of your life?
um, mentors when it comes to my recovery, honestly, my like I said, my grand sponsor and my sponsor have been instrumental in my recovery. I definitely look up to them, and I know like that's not why they do it, but at the same time, and I've got one old timer down in Medicine Hat who, when all else fails, I call him. He's been 38 years sober, 39 years sober this year, so I call him, and he's always got a piece of advice or suggestion that always seems to work for me. So yeah, that's he's there. As far as role models in every other day life, I've been doing a lot more outside of just the anonymous programs. I've been listening to a lot of that Russell Brand stuff and that. And
Okay.
it's nice to see the different spins on it from him. So I actually, I was handed him his program when I was in the Medicine at Recovery Center, and I just kind of chucked it aside and I was like, nah, whatever, right? But stuff like that. There's so many people, honestly, that have recovered that I just I don't want to say look up, like idolize or anything. I don't
Yeah.
idolize anyone, right? Because there's only one person, and I don't even idolize God. We have a relationship that
Mhm.
has changed my life, and He's the boss, and I just do as is placed in front of me. But I do anyone who's got a really strong program, and there's a lot of people even in the program itself that I've come across here in the last 6 8 months that I'm just like, wow, right? Like, and I think anyone who comes in and gets this right away is just my hat's off to them, because for me it took a long time. Like I said, it's been 14 years of in and out, pretending to be good and pretending, oh, I got this, and to the point where it was almost brain splatter on the wall, right? So yeah, so I've got quite a few people that I do appreciate for sure, and you're one of them too. Like this, a platform like this is just amazing, right? Where we can just speak our truth and get it out
Mhm.
there.
Awesome. Thanks. Speaking of truth, though, because talking about honesty, how has that transformed your life? How it looks today?
I'm an open book. Um, it's funny because I used to, for my first year of recovery, I did a lot of Facebook posts. If you do go look at my Facebook, which you're more than welcome to, my first year of recovery, I did a post every morning with 3 things I was grateful for, where I was at, and I did it every day, pretty much every day for just about the whole year. Um, but I was transparent, and that was the one thing that I learned, is that if I'm not honest with myself, I'm not gonna survive this disease. And for me, ask me anything. I have no secrets anymore. And my kids and stuff, like my youngest, I don't expose her to quite the same stuff I do to my 19-year-old
Mhm.
son, like because he's honestly my best friend, right? Like I've had him when I was 24 years old, so I was still a kid, really, right? Him and he's grown up sitting on my knee and learning a lot from me. So, but yeah, honesty for me is just putting it out there and not living in that craziness anymore. So
What a blessing, eh?
Oh,
Like,
it's so nice. I don't have any secrets, and you know what? It's a good place. It
yeah,
really is.
I got a couple expressions. If how does it go for again? If you're honest, you never have to remember anything, or if you tell the truth, you never have to remember anything.
Mhm.
And a clean conscience makes for the softest pillow.
Yes,
You know,
yes, yeah,
so
exactly.
yeah, I love little one-liners. Like you listen to the show, like you know, that's how I've had to keep it so simple, like over the years, and it's just those things that I can resonate and like apply them to my life, right?
Hmm.
What makes you the happiest today, or gets you excited?
Speaking honestly, when I come out of a detox center and and you've spread a little bit of hope to someone who's in there that their first time or even their 50th time, and they have the expression on their face, and they're like, "Wow, like maybe this," and it's not me. I understand that, but it's like planting that seed, and that honestly, like I was at a meeting last night, and I come out of there. It was a really good. It was like 7 people there, but it was one of those meetings that just hits you right, and I was talking to one of the guys that I had lost contact with. We went to treatment together, and it was just happened he happened to be at that meeting, so it was really cool. But we were chatting after, and I said, I said I've never experienced a high like recovery. That's what makes me happy is just the fact that and my grand sponsor says that all the time. This is the good stuff, right? And it's the truth, right? Like I know that's what makes me happy is the fact that I can be open, honest, maybe help somebody through a rough time, and like I said, I've never been this content in my life, and
Hmm.
it's all because I've just giving back, and I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Yeah, and that takes practice. Like and I don't know. Just speaking for myself, I don't know how it was with you. It like it takes practice reaching out, and being welcoming and not being afraid to talk to strangers, like getting out of your comfort zone to be able to connect to other people, right? Um, what what area? What was the hardest part to get out of your comfort zone, or what section of your comfort zone did you struggle the most to get out of, and was the most rewarding as a result? If that kind of makes
My
sense.
yeah, I've always been a talker, so like I've always been the class clown. I've always been, and I think a lot of that was to hide how shitty I felt about myself for years. But I think that was the biggest thing was for me to feel good about myself and still be that outspoken person. I wasn't hiding anything, right? So I could still be that outspoken person. I think that was one of the toughest things for me to overcome. That was my comfort zone was bury my feelings, put up a facade, and go with it, right? So now today it's what you see is what you get. You don't like me? Oh well,
Yeah.
there's therapy out there or something anyway.
Being authentic, right? Like
Right, yeah,
being authentic, being able to look in the mirror and being okay with self, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and not everybody's gonna like me. Being okay with that, right? I had some expressions. Here we go. Like, if you like everybody at all the meetings you're going to, you're not going to enough meetings. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, what do we got for time? Okay, I think I'll ask you a couple more here. Um, da, 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 maybe healthy habits. Actually, no, sorry. Let me do this one. This one popped into my mind earlier. Relapse prevention, or what do you have? So, as a relapse prevention plan.
For me, it's working with others is huge, right? Like for me, that's if I have a chance to give back. Um, I I I haven't thought of like I said since my brother's funeral. I haven't thought about drinking, drugging. The obsession's been removed, which is amazing. Not saying it can't come back, but continually working the steps, working with newcomers, giving back to the program that saved my life. I think that's the biggest relapse prevention I could ever suggest. Um, think it through. That never worked for me because my best thinking put a gun in my mouth.
Yeah,
Play the tape through. Yeah, I've done that, but to be honest, I the tape's going to end the same way every time. I'm going to be sore and hurt, and I'm going to want to go and medicate that. So my relapse prevention is honestly just staying connected with the people, as they say, stick with the winners.
yeah,
Like that's for me, that's been one of the biggest things that has ever worked for me. And like I said, program. That's my relapse prevention.
Yeah. Well, you get in it far enough and it's that much harder to fall out, right? So
Hmm.
it's like crawling into bed. You crawl in the middle of the bed, you're not going to fall off the edge so easy, right? You got to make a couple rolls or roll over first before you hit the
Exactly.
outside.
Yeah.
Are you spontaneous today at all?
Yeah, I can be. It's tough with the job I got, but if I get a rain day or something, I'll just jump in and I'll drive. Like, um, I went and surprised my grandma couple weekends ago. She still lives at home, 92, still drives, still lives at home. She's an amazing woman. Um, so she was crocheting, and I came into the house and I surprised her. But I'll go do some stuff that like when I was out in BC, I did a lot of hiking and stuff after my last relapse. I did a lot of hiking and just go. Sometimes I'll start walking, and I don't know when I make it back home, but I just go. I always make sure I tell people when I'm gone, and I text to let them know. But yeah, I like to just I don't go too crazy anymore. And life's pretty busy anyway. It's pretty much planned out for me. I think between all my obligations when it comes to the program and work. But if I do get a chance, yeah, I'd like to just sometimes just jump in and go on a road trip.
Nice. I'm going to ask you this last one, unless I have one that pops into my head. What was the biggest myth busted, I guess, about coming into recovery, if that makes sense?
Um, well, the very first AA meeting I went to years ago told me I was always going to be recovering. Um, with good sponsorship, I learned that I can be recovered, which doesn't mean I'm cured,
Mhm.
but it means that I don't have to live thinking about drinking or thinking about not drinking or drugging. I can live a life of freedom, and I don't have to go to meetings every day. Like I don't. I go to meetings now to try and help people. So I think that was the biggest thing is because who the hell wants to go someplace where you're always going to be sick? Like, what's the point then? You might as well just keep doing what you're doing because I'm sick anyway, right? So I think that was one of the biggest myths, and that thanks to my sponsor and the people around me, is that I can be recovered, and I'm willingly say I'm recovered. I mean, I get some looks sometimes, but I've
Yeah,
recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and it's a miracle, right? So
that's awesome. Yeah, and yeah, I'm in cahoots with you on that one. Like, we get this life worth living, right? That's where we don't stay sick. Not to say you can't or you can't not reverse, but like fall backwards into it if you stop doing the stuff that you need to do, right? I think you have to do something every day for your recovery, and it's not all the big things that we do, like all the sets of steps. It's the day to day
mhm.
that we get, like all the small things that build up life, right?
Absolutely. I heard it in that meeting last night. If I'm not working on my recovery, I'm working on my relapse, right? Like, and it's true, right? If I can, the like the big book says, right, it's easy to rest on our laurels. But when I start doing that, if I miss my nightly inventory, I'm part of an accountability group. If I don't hold myself accountable and some of that, like, it's easy to get caught up to go in that reverse pattern. It may not happen for like 100 days, but if I stop doing what I'm doing, reverse comes pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah, it's inevitable, right? Like, being honest with yourself, eventually where it'll end up. It's just not. It's a question of when, not if, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll ask actually this last question, then we'll wrap it up. You want to describe freedom today, like how you view the word freedom from addiction?
Peaceful. It's just peaceful and content. For me, my mind's not racing a million miles a minute. And I'm not saying it doesn't at times,
Mhm.
but today, like this morning, for example, at work, the one gravel truck, he couldn't back up to save his life, and God bless him. Because that's all I do now is I pray for them, right? But 5 years ago, that would have drove me off the wall, and I would have just sat there and played it over like this guy's an idiot. And you know what? Maybe he's a new driver. I don't know, but it's brought peacefulness to my mind that I don't have to sit there and pick apart everybody else, because chances are, if I'm picking them apart, it's probably something that I would do myself. So, yeah, contentment and peacefulness is exactly what it means to me today. And yeah, I used to be a rager. I don't do it no more. I think it through with the help of a little bit of prayer.
Nice. Nice. I think that pretty much wraps us up for time. I'll let you take us home. What's something that you want to share with the listeners that we haven't had a chance to say, or your final thoughts you'd like to leave them?
For me, if you're new or coming into recovery, is there's a lot of help out there. And for me, it was the anonymous programs, but like if there's something that's working for you, give it an honest effort, like, and be true to yourself, because I think that's one of the things that held me back for all those years, is that I was a chronic, I still am if I don't work my program, but I was a chronic liar, and I convinced myself that those lies were true. So for me, it's, you know, those who do not recover are those who cannot be honest with themselves, right? So, yeah, that's about all I have to say for that.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you for taking your time to share your truth with us. I really appreciated this conversation. This is the first time we ever met, right? So,
Absolutely, yeah.
it's been a blast.
I
And
appreciate being here too. It was awesome.
uh, thank you. Thank you. And, if you guys want to hear more, tune in. I'll leave you guys the same way I leave you every episode, and that's make lots of memories, take lots of pics, and show the world your smile. Cheers.